The Miami Dolphins will make a slew of decisions this offseason, but none will be bigger than the decision they ultimately make on the status of the contract of quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. We take a look today at quarterback contracts across the league and what a compromise could look like for Miami and their fifth-year quarterback.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint is upon us. And thus far this week, we have covered salary cap compliance, re-signing players that are expiring contracts within Miami, and what my free agency crop would look like. Today's a big day. We're talking quarterback. And not only are we talking quarterback, we're talking quarterback contract, which is a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, whether you're on one side of the fence on Miami's quarterback situation or the other. The two mixed together like water and oil, right? It's just not a very easy conversation to find middle ground on. But when I set out to do the blueprint, and I think this is especially applicable with the news that came out last night, I had the Dolphins giving Jerome Baker a contract extension. The Dolphins cut Jerome Baker yesterday in a bit of news that seemed to rattle the cages of a lot of Dolphins fans and creating an additional need. And the Dolphins will save an additional $3 million in change against the cap versus what my outcome was when I did a contract extension on Monday with Jerome Baker. I had somebody that reached out and was like, yo, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to adjust? Are you going to drop Baker off and redo it and redo all your slides for your presentation this week on the show? I said, no, because the objective when I started the blueprint was to say, what is apparent about the direction that this team wants to go? What is their intent? And then based off of the intent of the offseason, how do I maximize me personally with the resources that are available? How do I personally go about maximizing what this would look like? I'm not trying to bat 1,000 and have the 53-man roster projection be 53 for 53 in September. Would that be the coolest thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life? Maybe. But is that realistic? No. So instead, the focus is, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to maintain competitiveness in the midst of some transitions from contracts and segue out of a salary cap roadblock, I think is probably the best way you could describe it. So I had Noah Fant as an example for the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. My free agency class yesterday had Noah Fant as a signing in free agency. The team is hosted reportedly, according to Adam Schefter, Jonnu Smith, who's a free agent, yesterday at the facilities are apparently going back and forth in contract negotiations. How can that happen, Kyle? Free agency hasn't started yet. Well, Jonnu Smith was cut from his contract. So he's not an expiring contract. He could sign at any point because he's a street free agent. And there's a technicality there. The fact that he was cut from his contract as compared to being an expiring contract that also allows him to be signed by a new team and that team not have their compensatory picks formula threatened by his addition. And I didn't have a great point of emphasis on that with my free agency class because Aaron Brewer and Devin Duvernay and Rock Ya-Sin and Damian Lewis and no offense, these are all expiring contracts. They're not cut players. So my outcome may not have the compensatory element that Miami, if they choose to go down this path and they say, look, we're going to sign Laken Tomlinson because the Jets cut him. We're going to sign him for $5 million a year. And we're going to sign Jonnu Smith at a discounted rate because he was cut from his contract with the Falcons. And they're going to go all that different route. And then they're going to, through effectively May, have that strategy in free agency and then have the $18.5 million from Xavier Howard open up. And then they can go buck wild and sign whoever they want. Well, it is a little bit of a different strategy. It's not how I would play it because the objective is still to win the games now too. And there's other ways that you can go about facilitating draft capital aside of gaming the compensatory pick formula. But I say all that to say, Jerome Baker's not going to be changed on my offseason blueprint because it's what I would have done. If you want to know what it looks like, you say about $3.5 million, I'd probably sign Azeez Al-Shaair from Tennessee, the linebacker, and have him step into that linebacker spot, and it'd be about break even on the salary cap anyway. So if you want the exchange, there you go. That's my preferred option, knowing what I know now. But I say all that to say about quarterback itself. The Dolphins are going to pay him. They're going to pay Tua Tagovailoa. And I have been very consistent with my viewpoint on Tua Tagovailoa for the past several years, which he is a skill-specific player, that the Dolphins early in his career did him no favors in how they chose to surround him with players and schematically what they tried to do. They have catered what they do to his strengths, which is what all responsible teams do, for as many players as possible, and you have seen the fruit born. Now the question is the ceiling. And where does that pay stack up? It's not an easy conversation to sort your way through, but what we have is I've spent some time researching other quarterback contracts across the space, how they are structured, the averages, the funny money, the actual cash paid, the guarantees. I'm going to preview some of those now before we get into what I've put together for knowing the Dolphins are going to pay Tua, how I would structure a contract that kind of meets in the middle in some phases of the contract, has a certain distribution of guarantees, has a certain distribution of cash flow, and so on and so forth. So let's start with quarterback contracts across the space for the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. I have Spot Rack up. I think it's a very helpful tool to help illustrate. This is the top total value of contracts across the NFL right now. Joe Burrow is one, signed it last summer. Justin Herbert signed his just before Joe Burrow signed his. And Lamar Jackson at 260 signed his just before Justin Herbert signed his 262.5. And Jalen Hurts signed his $255 million contract just before Lamar Jackson signed his 200. So it was Hurts was the QB contract king, Lamar Jackson was the QB contract king, Justin Herbert was the QB contract king, and now Joe Burrow is the QB contract king. What I would say is this: I would not make Tua Tagovailoa the quarterback contract king from total value of contract of $275 million. We'll get into more of that later. You also have Kyler Murray, $230 million. Deshaun Watson, $230 million. Then you have Patrick Mahomes is $450 million, but that's across 10 years. That's probably going to get renegotiated 15 times. Josh Allen, $258 million, but it's across 6 seasons as compared to 5. So the AAV is significantly lower. And again, this is where all of this kind of gets murky. Burrow had $275 million across 5 years. That's the annual average value. And that is what contracts are so frequently distributed in and what they're ranked by. There's a couple contracts here that stand out for different reasons for how they are structured. We're going to get into those next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. Get buckets over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live-saving parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/on and shoot your shot with FanDuel. official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So let's talk about a couple of the specific contracts and how they're structured, because there's elements of those contracts that I think are very important for what I think is a responsible way to structure the Tua Tagovailoa contract extension. When you factor in the durability question, it's still fair to ask, right? He played 17 games. He played a full season for the first time like ever in college or the NFL. It's still a fair question to ask. I respect the heck out of what they did. I respect the heck out of his camp with Nick Hicks and his trainer and how they stacked weight on his body to build him up. And some people said he gained all this weight. Yeah, that's how an offseason works. You gain weight and then you cut. You don't lean build in an offseason and as an athlete when you're trying to put as much mass on your weight for body armor as possible. And you certainly don't turn around and complain about how he doesn't move as well when he put the weight on his frame so he had better durability so he could play 17 games. It's neither here nor there. There's a lot of nuance with this conversation that just drives me wild. And it's not, and so I think he's a perfect or transcendent player. And yet, here we are. So, let's go back to quarterback contracts across the space. Here's the first thing the Dolphins cannot do with Tua Tagovailoa's contract. They can't do the Deshaun Watson thing. The Browns traded for Deshaun Watson and did the dumbest thing that any team has ever done in the history of the NFL with a quarterback contract. 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed. $230 million guaranteed, an annual average salary of $46 million per. So they're probably going to restructure his contract again this upcoming season. He's got $46 million in base salary that they can turn and convert about $45 million of that into a signing bonus and put a void year on the back end of it. And 45 divided by 5. Now make me do the math on the spot. This is a slippery slope. What's that, 9? So they'd save $35 million against the cap this year, but then they would add $9 million to their $64 million cap hit in 2025. They'd add $9 million to their $65 million dead cap in 2026. They'd have $17 million in void money in 2027. I guess technically it's $18 million. And then they'd have $9 million in a new void year in 2028 as well. So all things considered, you'd go from $63.9 million in cap hits this year, next year, and 2026. And it would become 35 off of that. 28 this year. Is that right? And then 73, 73, and void years all accelerate the first year you're not on the team. So you'd have 18, you'd have a $27 million void cap hit in 2027. You don't want to do this because the only exit strategy out of this contract is to trade the contract. And I can tell you right now, if Deshaun Watson was hurt last year, he did not look the same in 2022. We are now very far removed from the dominant season that he posted in 2020. No team is going to trade for, say, the Browns want an exit strategy in this contract after this year. 2 years, $92 million, fully guaranteed. No one's going to trade for it, which makes it an untradeable contract. And therefore, the Browns are oriented with that contract. The Jalen Hurts contract has some mechanics to it that I think are good visualization or good strategy, but not necessarily well visualized on any of the cap websites. Conversely, instead of having a fully guaranteed salary every single year, Jalen Hurts effectively has a veteran minimum salary every single year, and he has an annual roster bonus. And those annual roster bonuses in some cases accelerate up to 2 years ahead of time. So if you want to get out of the contract, you're not running all the way through to the end of the contract with your commitment. Then you could then, in theory, trade the player, and somebody else could make the decision on the option and not be stuck holding the bag for the entire thing that was guaranteed at signing. The risk here, and Patrick Mahomes' contract does this as well. Patrick Mahomes' contract, as it is currently structured, is currently set to in 2020 or 2032 and 20 33 when his age 37 and 38 seasons. So problems for a long time from now. But nevertheless, $60 million void hits in each of those 2 seasons because of how they are distributing the cap. So there's going to come a time when this contract expires and the Chiefs are probably going to be looking at over $100 million in void years or void money for the first year he's off the team. But the first year you lose Patrick Mahomes, are you realistically going to expect yourself to compete anyway? No, probably not. This contract will look a lot different because it's going to continue to get fudged around a little bit. But the Hurts contract is the one that I really think Miami would have some inspiration to draw upon. 5 years, $255 million, $179 million in guaranteed, with an annual average salary of $51 million per season. The base salary with the team option or the club option, effectively, many of those of which guarantee at least a year in advance. So, for example, his 2026 salary and option, a third of it guarantees in 2 weeks for 2026. The rest of it guarantees next March. So as you go, you kind of play into more guarantees as it happens. That's nice structure. And the way that they have distributed the cap is not well illustrated here, but they're effectively utilizing, say, okay, all the cash you get on an annual basis, Jalen, we're going to just treat it like a signing bonus every single year. Which brings us to what I have down for my quarterback contract offer to Tua Tagovailoa for the 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint, with the objective being, they're going to pay him. So what does it look like to make it as palpable as possible, to have as much flexibility as possible for maintaining a winning window, not eating up a bunch of salary cap, not getting yourself backlogged with an untradeable contract, having exit strategies? All of that is taken into account. And I'm looking at Jalen Hurts' contract. I'm looking at Lamar Jackson's contract for the signing bonus that he was given by the team, trying to take that into account as well. So I drew inspiration from a number of other contracts. So let's get into the contract itself. The Tua Tagovailoa decision. My offer is a 5-year, $252.8 million contract extension. That is new money on top of the 1-year, $23 million 5th-year option he's currently on the books for. So this contract would put him under contract with the team to play through 2029, this year and 5 new years. But if you take the $23 million this year in year 1, even if you front more money into it up front, it's now a 6-year contract. So the total value of the new money of $252 plus $23 million in 5th-year option, it's 6 total years for $276 million. That average per year, or annual average value, is $46 million per. That would fall 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in the NFL. It'd be the 8th highest annual average salary if you included the 5th-year option year that he's scheduled to play for this year. But when you report the contract, when Adam Schefter reports the contract, when Ian Rappaport reports the contract, they say Tua Tagovailoa signs 5-year, $252 million contract extension for an annual average salary or annual average value of $50.5 million, because it's not including the 1-year, $23 million hit that he's currently on the books for right now in 2024. So from an agent game perspective, you could say, oh, well, that puts him in front of Kyler Murray, and that puts him in front of Russell Wilson, and that puts him in the top 5 of AAVs for quarterback contracts across the league. This contract has $134 million guaranteed at signing. If you're not watching on YouTube, highly recommend it. I have the full contract laid out. It's a very helpful visual aid for today's show. There's a hybrid of structures between what Jalen Hurts does on an annual basis, from roster bonuses that are treated like signing bonuses, there's a hybrid of the Jalen Hurts / Patrick Mahomes future years options that guarantee an advance, that give you kind of an exit out. There's the inspiration of the Lamar Jackson contract as far as the percentage of the contract that is a signing bonus up front, what you're paying up front and automatically prorating in. There's inspiration from Teron Armstead and Bradley Chubb's contract with the Dolphins as far as there's a percentage of the salary on an annual basis that is guaranteed on a per game active basis. Whatever percentage of games played you dress for, you receive that percentage of a certain portion of money. That exists in Bradley Chubb's contract. That exists in Teron Armstead's contract. That is infused in here as well. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this contract offer, what it looks like, the dollars behind it, and the implications, and all the questions you probably have about a contract of that magnitude and what that means for the Dolphins, including salary cap hits, exit strategies, all that kind of stuff. That's coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy, but they are also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. Are we having fun yet? I've dropped the numbers. 5 years, $252 million in new money for a quarterback contract. Now, just the raw value of the contract would put him 7th behind Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Be the 7th highest actual value. But you could also say, well, there's a 5th-year option included in there, so it's technically 6 years for $272, which would then in turn make it the 3rd high, or $276, which would make it $1 million more than the total value of the Joe Burrow contract. Aha! There's another one of your headlines. Total value of Tua Tagovailoa contract exceeds that of Joe Burrow. When in reality, it's not quite that cut and dry. This is all about finding headlines, right? Reporting quarterback contracts. And I know Mike Florio just went on, it was Pat McAfee, and totally took NFL insiders to task for this. And he's right. It's all a funny business to capture the headline. The way that this is structured, the first 3 years for Tua Tagovailoa, his 2024, 2025, and 2026 pay mirrors the Jalen Hurts contract, where there is a bonus, a lump sum bonus, and effectively a minimum base salary for your weekly game checks. The cash flow of those would be $50 million in 2024, which is a double pay raise versus the $23 million he's currently scheduled for in year one, in the final year of his rookie contract. A $45 million prorated bonus in 2025, and a $35 million prorated bonus in 2026. So that is a grand total of, if you put a base minimum salary, I have a $1.5 million to keep the numbers round as compared to the actual minimum salary, which is like 1.1 something. $50 million in a signing bonus, and then 2 fully guaranteed bonuses that get prorated out across each of the next 5 seasons from when they are paid. It is $134 million in fully guaranteed money at signing. What does that mean? 134 would rank 4th in NFL contracts in guaranteed dollars at signing, behind Deshaun Watson with the bozo contract of all time. Joe Burrow had $146.5 million fully guaranteed at signing. Lamar Jackson had $135 million fully guaranteed at signing. Justin Herbert checks in at 133.7. So you're right between Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert on the guaranteed at signing portion of the contract. And because you're saying you get a minimum salary and then you get a lump sum payment in 2024, you get a lump sum payment in 2025, and you get a lump sum payment in 2026, the salary cap commitments in 2024 would be $11.5 million. It's a savings of about $12 million from what he's currently scheduled for. His 2025, which would be a minimum salary, the second $10 million from the signing bonus that was paid this year, and the first $9 million prorated out across 5 seasons of the 2025 $45 million roster bonus, gives you, and then $2 million in stipulated money for how many games you're active for, what gives you a maximum value in the year 2 in 2025 of $22.5 million as your salary cap hit. Your year 3 salary cap hit would be $29.5 million because it's all the same things as the prior 2 years. It's year 3 of what your $50 million signing bonus was, year 2 of your 2025 roster bonus, and then your $35 million roster bonus in 2026 divided by 5 years. You spread that out across 5 years. Is an additional $7 million. So your first 3 years worth of cap hits in this contract is 11.5, 22.5, 29.5. That takes you through the years of fully guaranteed dollars in the contract. And that's where you get your first exit strategy. And I want to be totally fair to all sides of this camp, whether you like Tua, whether you hate Tua, I don't care, right? The objective is, how do I craft a contract? And anytime you make a contract with this level of decision and this level of commitment and this level of investment, you do have to protect yourself. And the Dolphins would be wise to protect themselves. Which is why in 2027, you've got a bonus that's a fraction of what your past bonuses have been. And you get a higher percentage of base salary. So now you're transitioning out of the Jalen Hurts contract. It's still a little bit like that, but it's not all the way in because you don't want to keep running up the tax bill. There's several void years on the back end of this proposed contract that help keep the numbers flexible, just like there are Jalen Hurts and just like there are with Patrick Mahomes. But unlike those 2 contracts, the void dollars in these contracts are the void years for the Tua contract is $20 million as compared to $120 million for Patrick Mahomes in 10 years and 90-something million dollars for Jalen Hurts in 6 years. So you don't want to lock yourself into that devastating dead cap hit if you do have to move on. So you have the 3 years of the guarantees, 2024, 25, 25, 2026. The guaranteed at later date portion is the 2027 year. And this is kind of when your exit strategy could open up if you needed to get out of this contract if things go catastrophically bad. I have him down that year for the low point in cash paid in the life of the contract. It's $29.5 million cash due that season. And it's not abnormal for teams to front load a bunch of cash on a signing bonus and then pay lesser cash. And I know Omar Kelly just did a piece on this today, I think, or yesterday, talking about actual cash flow in the first several years of the contract versus cash flow or what they're paid annually and the perception of what's reported and paid annually. The way that this is structured with a roster bonus that gets guaranteed in March of 2026 for the 2027 season, but doesn't get paid until the summer of 2027. You have a little bit more runway than normal to have an opportunity to trade, and a team that would be trading for Tua would say, okay, this is our only guaranteed money, and it's $29.5 million. And then there's 2 years of totally non-guaranteed money behind that. $49 million total in 2028 and 51 with the 2 years, the $2 million of how many games you play bonus that's available. So $51 million in non-guaranteed money in 2028 and $57 million, $55 million base salary and $2 million per game active bonus is available for 2029. if you needed to get out of the Tua contract, you got to 2027, the start of the league year, and you say, hey, he's due a $15 million bonus later this offseason. He's got a base salary of $12.5 million. We have an opportunity to draft a quarterback, or the durability thing is pop back up, and it's not going great. You could trade that contract post June 1st for a $26 million dead cap in 2027, and then a $49 million dead cap hit in 2028, which might feel like a lot, but 26 versus you're scheduled for 43, so you'd save $17 million against the cap in 2027 if you could trade him, and the cash flow makes it a tradable contract, unlike Deshaun Watson, which is why that was the dumbest contract anybody's ever given. And there's no guaranteed money in the years behind it, so you can say, hey, we'll take the roll of the dice. And then if it goes well, Tua's owed $51 million in cash, we can turn that into a new signing bonus, extend him, and not have to worry about these monster cap hits for cash flow for 2028 and 2029. So you're really locked in on the deal, a 6-year, $276 million total contract would be my offer, with top 5 guaranteed at signing. The practical guarantee, if you include the guarantees for the 2027 season, which is another $27.5 million, would bring your grand total of guarantees, practical guarantees, to $162 million. That would be 6th behind Watson's $230, Burrow's $219, Herbert's $218, Jackson's $185, and Jalen Hurts is $179. And maybe the Tua's camp gets this contract, they thumb their nose at it, and they don't want it. You know, that seemed to be the case with what happened with Jerome Baker. Although it seems like the Dolphins went lower than what my renegotiated contract would be, and that's why they couldn't come to pass. But if you're trying to find an authentic middle ground between we want to maximize the value of the player, we want to get good headlines and good pub for our player that we went to bat for, the Dolphins want to invest into Tua Tagovailoa. They want to keep him here and keep building around it with this brain trust of a team, but you want to protect yourself. You take the strategy of the Jalen Hurts contract that mitigates the impact in the early portions despite the large number of guaranteed dollars. Your total guaranteed exceeds that of Joe Burrow by $1 million. The 1-year, 5th-year option this year, 5 new years behind it. The total value of that, you'd say, this is the highest total value for not Patrick Mahomes of any quarterback in the league. But in reality, the way that you structure the money gives you the flexibility to make smart, sound decisions outside of the first 3-year sample size, which is 2024, 2025, and 2026. That's what you're locking yourself into with Tua Tagovailoa with a contract of that structure. Would his team take it? I don't know. But it's what I would offer. And I'd like to think it's a fair offer. The new money average of 50.5 per. That's market money. It's not reset market money, but it's market money. And with the questions that do exist with Tua, you wanted to see him elevate the team last year. It didn't happen. You understand there were circumstances that were outside of his control that were a part of that. But his own play was something that helped compound the issues that bit the Dolphins at the end of the season. And then the durability element. Those things are fair questions. And because of that, you do want to not just say, yeah, blank check, whatever you want. Yeah, go ahead, take it. Which is what the Browns did because they were so desperate for a quarterback. And how's it working out for them? Not great. So, assume this contract offer gets accepted. You'd be going into the NFL draft with my moves thus far, and you can follow along. You know, Monday was salary cap compliance. Tuesday was free agency, both internal and external. Today was quarterback contract, quarterback extension. After that gets done, you'd save again about $12 million against the cap versus the $23 million he'd be scheduled for. And you would go into the NFL draft with about $14 million in cap space, knowing you had $18.5 million coming from Xavier Howard on the other side of the draft on June 2nd for more spending power. And you'd have the following needs in what I would quantify as primary and secondary needs and ancillary needs for the Dolphins going into the 2024 NFL draft. We are doing the mock draft tomorrow. I actually have it done. But I went across all the websites with a simulator and I tried them all out and asked which one do I like the best, which one do I think gives me the best experience in trying to emulate the draft experience. And then once that was decided, I said, okay, this is the one. And I ran it. And if I got offered trades, I considered trades. If I didn't get offered trades, I had to stick and pick. And whoever was on the board was on the board. Whether it was players I liked or players I didn't. I was kind of at the mercy of the simulator, which is why I took a little bit of time to figure out which one I wanted to run. But free agency, I have the Dolphins signing Damian Lewis and Aaron Brewer and bringing back Isaiah Wynn. I still need a starter on the offensive line. I consider that a need. My interior defensive line currently comprised of Zach Sealer, and I brought in Fali Fatukasi from Jacksonville as a post-June 1st cut. That is really the experienced NFL player. Brandon Peely's under contract for like $900,000 and doesn't even count against the top 51 cap. I need a starter on the interior defensive line, unequivocally, whether that's a nose tackle or otherwise. You have the edge rusher need because of the injuries that have experienced, although I did bring back Andrew Van Ginkel and I signed Marquise Haynes Sr. in free agency. And then a third wide receiver I would consider a secondary need. So my primary needs are a starting O-lineman and a starting interior defensive line. Secondary needs, I need another edge rusher to help bridge me through and to maybe set myself up for some flexibility for starting in 2025 with Bradley Chubb's contract. More on that on Friday. Third wide receiver, we brought in Devin Duvernay, but more of a special teams guy. We brought back River Craycraft. We got Azukama, and then you obviously have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I need another body, a weapon. And then ancillary needs, I would consider, maybe somebody with some pop and power as a runner. And then depth in the secondary. The Dolphins have the picks that they're scheduled for with no third-round draft selection, so 2 picks in the first 2 days, unless I get trade offers from the simulator that give me the warm and fuzzies. Whether or not that happens, you're just going to have to come back tomorrow and find out. I'm Kyle Krabs. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. Our 2024 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint continues with knowing what the direction is that the team is intent on, how I would attack this offseason in all angles and all phases to try to maximize the opportunities that await this Dolphins team in 2024 and beyond. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.